PFT Media.
Hello, I'm Kyle Eagle, co-producer and host of The Major Scale, a music program here on PFT Media. Outside of music, I have a real passion for reading, starting from childhood with comic books, and in recent years, graphic novels. In recent times, there's been a real renaissance happening in graphic novels. Storytelling and narrative devices have taken great leaps beyond your traditional written word, be it Derf Backderf's illuminating biography of serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer, or Josh Frank's discovery of Salvador Dali's Giraffes on Horseback Salad featuring the Marx Brothers, or comedian Dana Gould putting out Rod Serling's original adaptation of Planet of the Apes, or reissued translations of European and South American cult classics like Corto Maltese and The Eternaut. Altogether, these are stories told way outside the box that will entice your imagination and your intellect. Since the comics conventions are a bust due to the pandemic, PFT Media wanted to deliver some of the action to you by bringing to light the who's, what's, and how's with some of the creators behind these fine works. So I spoke to Tom Scioli, a Will Eisner Award nominee known to comic book fans for his work with Image and Marvel Comics with such titles as Godland, The Fantastic Four Grand Design, GoBots, American Barbarian, Satan Soldier, The Myth of Oedipus, and even co-wrote Transformers vs. G.I. Joe. In Jack Kirby, The Epic Life of the King of Comics, Scioli takes the bold move to tell the life story of Jack Kirby, a comic book extraordinaire and a true legend, and in the best way possible, as a graphic novel. Kirby is the mastermind behind Captain America, Silver Surfer, The Fantastic Four, The Avengers, The X-Men, The New Gods, Black Panther, and Wakanda, and much more. Tom spoke with me about his inspirations and approach to writing this book and what he hopes to gain from people reading it. Jack Kirby, a modern mythmaker and a rare artist whose work is a gift that keeps on giving to this very day. Well, one thing I want to start with about Jack Kirby is that I feel like when I was a kid, he was obviously, I was into comics. That's what kind of got me going artistically. And of course you hear his name. But now he's been going since 94, 26 years ago. And I feel like he's like one of these artists like William Burroughs or Edgar Allan Poe or Philip K. Dick or John Coltrane, where they're long gone, but they're still inspiring us. We're still discovering his work. We're still, new audiences are finding relevance in his work. What do you think? Would you agree with that or what?
Yeah, no, that sounds spot on. I mean, there's a lot of reasons for that, but I mean, foremost being just how prolific he was. There's just, so much of it out there. And, when you like work as long as Kirby did and as like steadily as he did, you do sort of amass like a certain kind of complexity, and like your work is naturally going to get more and more interesting, as it goes on. It's kind of, if you sort of stop or you give up or you start phoning it in, that development ceases. But I mean, he was, doing comics, steadily, at this sort of like breakneck pace, for his entire life. So yeah, it just kept getting better and better. And there's so much to unpack. I mean, he, some of his work is like very direct, very accessible. But then some of his work is like a little, harder to crack. And, those are the kind of thing, like those names that you listed, like Burroughs and Coltrane. It's kind of like, if their work were, sort of more like smoother or more, what you see is what you get, we might not be as interested in them after all these years. But since their work is kind of like off kilter, and sometimes you're not even exactly sure, what's going on, like those are the kind of things that people come back to and really, that's the stuff that gets under your skin and sticks with you. He said he tried to think like, be like sort of 15 years ahead of things, but sometimes he was, 40 years ahead or 50 years ahead. Sometimes he was so far ahead that like the audience just wasn't there yet, so like I think of things like, like his Fourth World and New Gods, where it was like, I don't know that the audience was ready for that in 1970, but it certainly is, in 2020.
What was your turn on moment with Kirby?
I've been studying Kirby, for decades at this point. Like I just really, fell in love with his work. And I was young enough that like I wasn't yet fully formed as an artist, as a writer. And so I kind of like, I saw his work and I thought, I want to make something like this. I want to figure out what makes this tick. Cause it was so strange and so wonderful. And I wanted to kind of see if I could do that. Like it seemed like this, really intriguing project. And then I did, and it kind of took over for, at least 10 years. I was sort of caught up in trying to emulate Kirby, try to think like him, try to create like him, not, repeat what he had done, but try to sort of create new work in like a Jack Kirby mode. So, I mean, I'd sort of spent, a long time making like those like Jack Kirby kind of comics, sort of, action, adventure, sci-fi, mythological stuff. And, with that Jack Kirby look. And, I just did it for years and just continued to study his work and study his life. And, so it was something that pretty early on, I kind of realized that like, that's something I want to read. Like I would love to read a graphic novel about the life of Jack Kirby, by him. And then, that's kind of how a lot of like my ideas start, is with, sort of like, oh, this is something I'd like to read. And then it's like, okay, well, it doesn't exist. So maybe I could make that. So it was kind of like that. It was like, okay, somebody's going to do a Life of Jack Kirby graphic novel. Jack Kirby didn't do it. Maybe I can do it. And as his like 100th birthday came along, it's like, okay, nobody's done it yet. That would have been the perfect time for somebody to do it, and nobody's doing it. And then it's like his 101st came by. So now we're at his 103rd birthday. So I finally kind of, sat down and just started putting pencil to paper and bringing it all together.
So how did your research go into this? What were some of the challenges that you had making this book, and what did you learn about Jack?
Yeah, I mean, the challenges were just that there were like, huge, gaps in our knowledge about these things. I mean, Kirby is one of the people in comics who's been like most studied and most like, discussed, but even so, it's, that's not saying much, compared to other art forms. Like we don't, know his biography the way, we might know, like Picasso's or so, just to name a name. And so, there's just a lot of holes. And then, sort of the most, like the things that, the audience are sort of most curious about are sort of things that happened behind closed doors, where the two main people involved, Jack Kirby and Stan Lee, are no longer alive. And when they were alive, when they would talk about this stuff, they presented very conflicting stories and sort of changing stories. Both of them, like their accounts of these things would change. So how do you find the truth, in that kind of situation? So that was sort of the biggest challenge.
Yeah, that comic tropes bit that I watched on his religious aspects of his work, I guess his pictures of God that he did.
Yeah, that was sort of later in life, and that's what he would do for fun. I mean, he was somebody who drew nonstop for work because his work demanded that. But when he had some time off, and wanted to just have some fun, he'd draw these pictures, and a lot of times they'd be devotional, they'd be religious, they'd be like a drawing of Moses, a drawing of Jacob wrestling the angel, and sometimes they'd be sort of straight, like what you would expect, but then a lot of times they'd be kind of like sci-fi infused, or just really like allegorical, and just bringing like there's one of like God turning his back on mankind, and just like all this, like, this sort of like phantasmagoria of like human suffering, and like self-inflicted human suffering, and as God has to by necessity turn his back to it. And so yeah, this is the kind of stuff Kirby was into, and I mean, his like mainstream work, like the work that he did for comic books and stuff, sort of there were religious elements to it pretty much from the beginning, of like devils and angels and at least like the gods of mythology and things like that. But at some point in the 60s, he did start sort of consciously incorporating these kind of like it's like the cosmic era of his comics. He started in like the Silver Surfer and Galactus, and sort of putting in this kind of like semi religious symbology and stuff, and then eventually like just New Gods, where it's overtly like right there in the title. And it was sort of a like coalescing of like his own personal interests, but then also kind of the zeitgeist. There was sort of something in the air around that time, like the larger culture was kind of going in a similar direction too.
When you look at those works that weren't well known, like the God pictures,
there's
that one with the orb of like human suffering. Yeah, the image with the knife coming out of that guy's mouth.
Right. Yeah.
Holy mackerel! This guy. Mm-hmm. He's not just. I always hate when people, he's a comic book artist. No, he's an artist.
Yeah.
I mean,
mm-hmm. It doesn't need the qualifier.
Yeah, this guy could have done exhibits of work.
Mm-hmm. Another one, which was also a derivation, is I would see like like a John Byrne drawing or whatever of like Orion on his astro harness. It was this kind of like this like very intricate like flying vehicle that like Orion would be on, and it was a John Byrne drawing, but obviously he's it's a Jack Kirby design by way of John Byrne. And like when I saw that, I was like, man, I really like that. Like whatever that is, I really like it. And then like later on, learning about Kirby and the New Gods, and that was a Kirby, it like was like, okay, yeah, that's it. That's what I'm into. This sort of like futuristic mythic god on this intricate flying machine. That's what I'm into.
We don't really know who created the Greek and Roman mythologies, those gods.
Sure. Yeah, and we don't even know like who Homer is. Like we don't
But we know Jack Kirby.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a great movie called Getting Straight with Elliot Gould, where the guy's reading a comic in class and he goes, "Oh, I love this stuff. Modern mythology." That's what it is. It's modern mythology. Superman, he's the Goyim or the Golem.
Okay. I mean, Superman is even more sort of like directly like Moses' story.
Yeah. And I just think these, in like the time of Thunder the Barbarian in the post-apocalyptic world, if one finds a comic from Jack Kirby, it could be, this must be some god that lived back then. No,
mm-hmm.
But that guy, he's there. He's our American mythology. He's helped create that. Mr. Scioli, really appreciate your time, and I'm looking forward to putting this together, putting it out there, and let's stay in touch.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, this was fun.
Yeah, thanks, man. Appreciate it.